Every rulebook typically needs to be in increments of 4 pages, sometimes 8 pages, depending on your manufacturer. And as a result, if you're 1 page over and it gets you to an odd number, that's not going to work. And so you need to do something to either compress the content or add more content. And typically the solution is to compress the content. A solution that we've been doing on occasion here is combining the components and the setup into a single double-page spread. Now, this is a very specific use case, and it doesn't always work for every game. And I wanted to show some edge cases where you might be pushing the limits of what this could actually be used for. In the case of Marvel Damage Control here, when each player has their own personal play zone with a tableau that needs to be tracked, that means the overall diagram has to be much smaller to fit in all of that content into the same amount of space. In this case, this is a 4-player setup. And we have to find somewhere else on the spread to show the differences when you have to set up for different numbers of players. And thankfully in this game there was only just the size of the play area to consider, so we could show that in a relatively simple vector diagram over here in the setup section on the top left in these gray squares. In the case of Atlantic Robot League, this is a great use case for this approach, partly because every player's personal play area is just this bedding sheet that you see on the right-hand side here on this page. So in truth, we could actually fit the game setup and personal play area and the components all on one diagram on one page. It made it very simple. So those were examples of combining the components and setup diagrams. What you may find in your game is that the way you have to set up your rulebook is to separate them. And often, if you can do it, it's great to show these as facing pages. In this case, in the game Bequest, we have the component overview on the left page, and then we have setup examples on the right page for every player account supported by the game. In the game Squid Ink, we do have very few components, just like in the previous game, but the play area is much larger, and so we couldn't show the player setup for every player account. This is the components overview from Marvel Age of Heroes, a worker placement game. And as you can see, there's a lot more components here, way more than we could fit onto a single page. This had to be a double-page spread to show everything at a scale that would be easy to reference as you're doing an inventory manifest, taking things out of the box. That meant also that we had to move the setup area to its own double-page spread. The difficulty with this game is that there is a universal setup that you do every game, but there's also optional missions that have their own cards, their own components, and so we also have to show the setup for those optional variants in a clear way. And this was our solution. You may have noticed in previous diagrams we used letters to indicate components. In this case, we're using letters to indicate the optional modular steps that you have to take to set up the individual missions. Once those missions are complete, then we continue and finish the number sequence that was begun on the previous double-page spread. In a more complex example like Clash of Cultures, we also have so many components that we couldn't fit them into anything less than a single double-page spread, which made us move the setup into the following page. Thankfully, we did have room to show multiple player account setups on that page, along with a more complete individual player area setup on the following page. And that's a quick overview of how we have been working on components and setup diagrams for rulebooks. If you have any questions, or if you have your own thoughts on how to best display this kind of information, I'm really open to hearing any suggestions and just general discussion about the topic. Just drop it in the comments. Thanks. Bye.